Welcome to the Billable Mom podcast, led by attorney Cari Rincker, where we discuss working motherhood, but especially geared to professional mothers who are trying to juggle their time. Our time is precious, both at work and at home. We talk time management and productivity hacks, the struggles of being a working parent, and provide a community where other billable moms are also trying to calm the chaos 6 minutes at a time. Listen to stories of other working moms, but especially lawyer moms, navigate the waters balancing career and the ever-present demands of motherhood.
Hi, I'm Cari Rincker, and I am the Billable Mom, and I've got Quinn Dalan in the house. Quinn, it has been forever since we have seen each other. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to see you, and I just figured this is a fun time to chat with my friend Cari.
Yeah. So in way of background, Quinn and I actually went to law school together. So the fact that I am a lawyer and I passed law school, Quinn is one of the handful of people that gets all the credit for keeping me sane and focused during my first year of law school there at Regent University. So Quinn, I'm so excited to catch up again. So the last time we actually saw each other in person, I believe we were literally road tripping across the country to Washington State, where you planted after law school. And I know that you're from Washington. So why don't you catch our listeners up on sort of your path to becoming a billable mom?
You're right. We were. My red Honda Civic was packed full. I think I even made you leave some of your stuff behind. I was like, this won't fit in my car. And I had my little red Pomeranian along for the ride. That was such a fun adventure. So when I landed back in Washington, I had passed the North Carolina bar and then decided to go home. So I had to take the Washington State bar. And then I got a job working at the Yakima County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, where I was a prosecutor for 3 years, switched to do some public defense, eventually switched to do non-lawyer work completely for about a year until I realized I missed being a lawyer. And now I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization, a legal aid nonprofit organization, and I do some legal work on the side of that too. So I stay very busy.
And you are a mom of 2 and a wife, so fill us in on that as well.
And I met and married one of my opposing counsel when I was a prosecutor. He was a public defender, and we connected, and the rest is history. Married in 2012 and had our first kid in 2014 and our second in 2017. So I'm a mom of 2 boys. You can, if you're watching this in video form, you can see my superhero with RBG in the background, which I took from their room when they were no longer into superheroes. But they are wild. They're everything you think a 9 and 6-year-old boy would be. They're so wild. They're so good. They're so smart. They're so funny.
Aw, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your transition to motherhood. So talk to us about where you were in your career when you had your first child.
So I had been at the prosecutor's office for 3 years. Then I had done a year and a half of public defense out of county. And I had come back to Yakima County and started kind of my own firm. And then I got pregnant. And I was making enough with my firm that I was, the doors were open, whatever. I was married. I had some supplemental income, right, coming in through my husband. But I felt I wasn't making enough money to pay for daycare. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I panicked. I mean, I don't want to suggest my first was completely planned, but it was still one of those oh my gosh, what's this going to do to my career? I don't want to stay at home, but I also don't know if I can afford childcare. So I took a contract where I exclusively did juvenile defense work with the knowledge that, my oldest was coming. So I was, graduated in 2007. I had him in 2014. So I was about 6-ish years into my legal career when I got pregnant, and used that pregnancy as a way to transition into something a little bit more stable, where there was, set income coming in, but I could still use my law degree and do all that.
So did you do anything else really from a career perspective or in preparation for your first child coming? It sounds like you had a big shift in terms of your law practice.
I think the biggest shift for me was I have to find something where I can at least have a guaranteed income coming in. And so I loved my own practice and it was super fun. And there was some things about transitioning out. It had only been about a year, but when I got pregnant, so when I went contract, I got to keep my quote unquote firm. It's just that my hours and things were changed to basically the county saying, we'll give you this much money every month if you take on these many juvenile cases. And I ended up loving it. I love juvenile defense, but I don't know that I would have made that same, like, there's a lot of ways that was just out of necessity, right? Of like needing that comfortable, safe, okay, I can do this and be a mom and be a working mom.
So your first child enters this earth and you are, whiplash, you're a mom, and talk to us about that transition, your maternity leave.
Yeah. So that transition was rough for me. I'm not quite as focused and type A as you are, but I feel like every single lawyer is like, even if they think they're on the chill side, they're still type A, right? Like, so I read all the books, right? I read what to expect when you're expecting. I did all the research. I had questions for my doctor every time I would go in, right? I have all these questions about what's this mean and what's this mean and what's this mean. And I was still just like so completely unprepared for motherhood. It was hard. I remember so I had a planned C-section with my oldest. He was breech. And I don't know, did you have C-sections?
So my first child was not a C-section, but I was in labor for 36 hours. And my second child was a C-section. So I've had both experiences, and C-sections are no joke. So
I was nervous about going into it. I wasn't taking it lightly, but I was just unprepared for like having to learn how to sit up again. Right. And having to walk again and not feeling like I can't bend down and grab anything off the floor. And I can't there for a while. Like my husband would help me put my underwear on. Right. Cause I'm like, I feel like I can't bend over and do this. I am, very independent, very self-sufficient. I love my husband. I don't need my husband, right? Like I'm a go. I operate probably faster than any of my friends would ever want to operate, right? Like so just that alone, the slow, the forced, you cannot do anything. You cannot drive. You cannot vacuum. You cannot do anything but pick up your baby. That was super hard. Mm-hmm. Also, what was hard is just like all the things that are out of your control, right? Like, my milk didn't come in. So, Bennett got jaundice. I had to go into the doctor. I wasn't sleeping well, because you're waking up all the time to feed your baby. And then turns out he's not getting enough food. And so it was a rough transition. And I remember talking to a friend who had babies around the same time. And she said she also had a rough transition. And she told a nurse, she said, I just don't understand, like 16-year-olds have babies. Like, how is this so hard for me? Like, I'm a grown woman who has done hard things. And the nurse was like, yeah, but you have your own life. And you were adult enough when you had your kids that you had built this identity in this life. And then you're just, I think you said whiplash. Like, it is just such a change to say, whoa, now this is your new identity. And I always felt like you can do two things when you're a mom. You can drown with the identity and just, that's it. I'm nothing but a mom. This is my new identity. I'm just going to go for it. Or you can kind of fight back and be like, I am a mom and I'm still a wife and I'm still a lawyer and I'm still a working mother and I still have passions and interests outside of my kids. And that's hard work, right? It's hard work to fight back on. To me, it felt like you're in the ocean and a wave just overtakes you.
Yeah, I love that analogy because it's almost like you've got to like fight for yourself, in motherhood. And I mean, kudos to stay-at-home moms because like I think that is heroic and like awesome and like a very different way. But I think I feel like even in that context, you have to fight for yourself. Like, what are your hobbies? Like, what do you enjoy doing, outside of it? Just because it's just motherhood is all consuming.
Being a stay-at-home mom is too hard for me. I mean, that's the reality. Like you said, kudos, hats off. I'm a better lawyer than I am a mom some days. So yeah.
Yeah, I go to work for a break from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, you probably don't even remember this conversation. I think I was pregnant with Jace at the time, and I was telling you that I was pregnant and all the things. And, you said something that was so sage. You go, Cari, you can do anything you want with children, but it's like you have a parachute attached to you and you're just going to go slower. And I had to tell you, Quinn, I think about that a lot. I think about that like even just this morning. It was like it took me forever just to get outside the house, unpack, and we're going to go on a miniature vacation this weekend. And I'm recording a podcast and trying to do all the things. And Jace wanted me to play with him, and just everything just moves slower, right? But like we're here, I'm here recording the podcast. Like the van got loaded, And so why don't you talk to me a little bit more about your experiences with that?
So yeah, after I had kids, it was like, because I used to do track, right? I was a sprinter, and so they'd make you sprint, right? And then they'd tie the little parachute on the back and make you sprint, right? And you're still sprinting, you're just slower. And it's even if you're not slower, it's harder, right? Like, maybe you're a couple seconds slower, but also you're working harder to even do it, right? So it's harder work and you're slower and you're getting less done. And that's always felt, I mean, I think that like I had kids, and in some ways, probably just the natural arc of my career, right? Like things got busier. I'm on more committees. I'm involved more in my community and then across the state. So I would never say like, oh, you have kids, so you can't do things. But I would say just know everything is harder. You have to find childcare, right? You have to have childcare. So if you have, I think childcare is hard to find and it's expensive. And then what happens when your kid is sick and can't go to daycare, right? Or, and then you're scrambling to find, you've got court cases set and you've got childcare that you're trying to juggle and you're trying to deal with all that. And so, there's times I take my kids now that they're 9 and 6, they come with me to court. If something really shuts down, like I swear school has so many days off. I'm like, why are you randomly closed this one day in March? Like, could you please just continue to educate my child? But, I think there's always these, pivots, and I'm lucky I have a great partner, right? But he's also a lawyer. So there's times where like the world will, there's a snow day even, right? And work does not care that there's a snow day. There's not a snow day for our courts. And so it's trying to figure out like, what are we doing with all of this, right? And then same, like last night, I drove over to Seattle for a friend who was being honored. And when I came back, my kids were in bed. So I didn't read them their nightly story that night, And so it's like, there's a balance. And I'm glad that my boys get to see me living my life and doing what I love and also getting to be a mom. I hope that bleeds into how they view the world and what they think about the world. But, there's nights they don't get to see me. And that's just a reality for them.
Yeah, just yesterday, I actually had like an all-day CLE that I was going to, which stands for Continuing Legal Education. And so I had to leave early for this. And my son he was crying. I don't want you to go. And I was trying to tell him like, listen, you go to school. I'm going to school today. I'm going to my version of school today, and I'll be back tonight. And to your point, Quinn, I think it's important for him to see that, like, listen, school doesn't just stop, and I still have to pursue my education as well. And I won't be here for breakfast. Right. And so I do think it's good to let our kids see that too.
I'm hopeful that it, whatever their future relationships look like, I'm hopeful that what they've learned is both people get to do. Hopefully you're in a relationship, if they are in a relationship where both people get to do what they want to do, right? To some extent. Like, there's not one, my husband's not sacrificing his career or his dreams, but neither am I. And so, that looks different and that takes some work, but I'm hopeful they get to see that balance, right? That they know I love them. And also I have other things I love too, right? I have other things that make me feel like me, and I have other things I feel called to do, right? So I'm hoping they see that just as I don't know. I'm hoping they look back at me with kind eyes when they're looking at their mom.
I know. I do get scared because sometimes I do hear comments coming from my son about, mom likes to work and, and things about me working. And so I feel self-conscious about it sometimes. Like, am I a bad mom? Am I working too much? So I don't know. Do you ever have those feelings as well?
I mean, yes, I think every mom struggles with, like, am I giving enough to work? Am I giving enough to my kids? Where's that perfect balance? I think the answer is there is no perfect balance. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the reality. But I also think, like, something I read was talking about moms saying, "Ugh, I have to go to work," kind of justifying it, trying to make their kids feel better of, like, this isn't even something I want to do, but I'm going to leave you and go. And the piece that I read was talking about, like, then you're just telling your kids that this thing that doesn't even matter to me still comes before you in some ways, right? And so there is some power and strength and hopefully empowerment in saying, I love this. This work makes me feel alive, and I love you too. And we're allowed to exist in this both and, right? Of this, I love you so much. There's nothing I wouldn't do for my kids. And also, they deserve a mom who feels alive and who feels like she contributes to making this world a better place. So I think there's this idea of, like, maybe hopefully Jace is like, my mom loves me so much. And also there's this whole other part of her where she's just like, Cari, I just watch you on social media and I'm like, what is Cari not doing? You make such a big impact. You're an author, right? You have a podcast. You have a successful firm. You're killing it. I hope you know that. As a mom,
you're gonna make me cry. You can't make me cry. And then plus, in the middle of all that, what people don't see behind the scenes is, like, I'm trying to keep my sanity, right? Mm-hmm. So, at the end of the day, we all only have so many hours in the day. And I love how you just, like, reframed that for your kids of, like, it's important for me to be the best version of me. And I've been trying to, like, tell Jace too, like, I have to go to court today. I have to help somebody. Remember, I'm a lawyer. I help people that are in need. And so whatever you do, I know that not just lawyers that are listening to this podcast, but I think there's a way to frame it in a way that's, like, very positive for your kids. And I like that a lot. To go backwards on a comment that you had made about you struggling after your first child, because I know that we had a conversation about that. And I don't remember if I was pregnant or if I was postpartum at the time, and you had shared that story with me and another law school classmate. And, I just want you to know, like, even us having that conversation a few years ago, just really, like, gave me just so much, I just felt maybe empowered in that fact I'm not alone in feeling this difficulty during this challenging time. And so talk to me a little bit about, like, when you were going through that. It sounds like it was very impactful, that conversation that you had with that law school classmate. Like, what advice would you give to other women that are really struggling?
I think we do such a disservice. Like, yes, I love my kids, right? But I think we do a disservice when we say, when there's only one motherhood narrative. Like, pregnancy was amazing, right? Having the baby, I've never known a love like this, right? Like, I can't imagine my life before this child, and motherhood is just, just this magical journey, right? And if that's the only narrative you're hearing, when that's not you, it's like, am I a bad mom? Am I doing this wrong? Like, why is it, talking about things that, like, it's not like I have, like, I went to law school. I passed 2 bars. I have done hard things, right? And so to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one struggling with this. Like, I'm not usually even the only person struggling with issues. So it's so alienating.
Mm-hmm.
And like, when I was pregnant, people would be like, oh, how is everything? And I would say, oh, it's the worst. I literally hate every single day of this. And there was always 2 responses. One, the moms who also felt that way, it's like they breathed a sigh of relief and they were like, oh my gosh, you're saying that out loud? Like, you're right. It was really hard. And then the other response was just horror. Like, they weren't sure that they should call, like, Child Protective Services because I wasn't, like, just enjoying every moment of, like, growing another human being, right? And then when I had, I'll share this story on the podcast just in case some future mom is listening. But when I talked about this. I had a C-section I wasn't prepared for. My milk didn't come in. There was just a lot. I wasn't sleeping, and I need my sleep. Like, I'm a sleeper, and my husband did not take leave with me. So I was taking unpaid leave, and he promptly went back to work as soon as I was out of the hospital. And he came home one day. I think Bennett was, 2 weeks or less. And I was sitting on our chair holding him. And, I just want to say, like, Bennett wasn't even a hard baby. Like, I look at some of my mom friends that have colicky kids, or just there's allergies to all kinds of formula or whatever. I mean, my experience was pretty easy, and still I had, like, my little mental breakdown. So he came home and I burst into tears, and he's like, what's wrong? And I said, you know what? I never make mistakes. And I just made the biggest mistake ever by having a kid. Like, I shouldn't have done this. I'm going to pay for this mistake for 18 years. This isn't working. I don't know what to do. He grabbed our baby and said, you need to go lay down and get some sleep. And I did. I took a nap. I heard from another one of our law school classmates, completely out of the blue. It's not like I regularly text with this woman. And she said, hi, hey, just checking in to see how it's going. And I'll tell you, I did not respond with, oh, I am in the pit of despair right now. How's it going for you? Right? Like, that wasn't what I said. And also, whatever I said to her must have let her know, you need to tell Quinn, every baby's hard. Like, right? So her response to me in whatever I had said to her, which I can't even remember, but it obviously wasn't like the bare truth of it all. She said, you know what? She had 3 kids. She said, every kid is hard. It's hard. It takes a toll on you. It takes a toll on your marriage. It takes a toll on your career. Like, every single time it's hard. And she was like, it gets easier. Every day gets easier. Every month gets easier. I feel this every single time I have a kid, and I have 3. So obviously I feel like it's worth it. Like, it gets easier. You can do this. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling like it's hard, because it is hard. So I think my husband brought me home some Dairy Queen. I ate some ice cream. I took a nap. I commiserated with a mom friend, and just knowing, like, this feels really hard and long right now, but it will get better. And she was right. Every single day got better. Every single month got better. It just all got better.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Although sometimes I have a toddler, and a baby, and sometimes I wonder which was harder, toddlers or teenagers. So,
That's true. There's always those days where I'm like, I remember when you couldn't walk or talk back, and I kind of miss that. But in general,
So talk to me about your first maternity leave. I think that you had mentioned to me previously it was around 5 weeks. Do you want to tell me more about that? And more specifically, if you could roll back the clock and do things differently, what would you have done differently?
If you could roll back the clock and do things differently is such a great question, because I'm like, I don't want to butterfly effect it and change where I'm at now, which I'm very happy with now. But my first, like I said, I took this contract so that I had some income coming in. And then after I got the contract, I told them, by the way, I'm pregnant and I'll be going out on leave. The first time, Bennett was due July 22nd. And I had convinced myself he was a first baby, so he would be late. So I had hearings that week, the week of him.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, how hard can this be? Turns out very hard. That was a dumb thing for me to do. But I had hearings scheduled that week and, of course, the week before. And then when I went in and had to have my planned C-section to get him out because he was breech, and some other like complicating factors, I was up. Like, I think he was born like on a Wednesday. I was up Tuesday night because I found out Friday I was having the C-section. Tuesday night, like typing notes for coverage. Like, I had arranged somebody to cover in August, and so I wasn't getting paid in August. But like, I had to really scramble to make sure that my cases were taken care of, and that things were continued. And so did my husband. So he was doing the same thing. And then I took, I want to say 5 to 6 weeks unpaid. So they transferred my contract essentially to some other lawyer who was covering my cases during that time, which I had to arrange for coverage, and they got the money for that. I think what I would have done differently, which I did do with my second child, which was take the week off before, like and of course that was a C-section too. So I knew when he was coming, so I could take the week off. Even though I took some unpaid leave for my second kid, it was like, I still didn't get everything I thought I was going to get done in that 1 week before, but it gave me some breathing room, and I wasn't going into my C-section like I'm exhausted and I'm stressed, and I, just handed off all these cases to somebody who I trust, but still, like, I'm sure I was checking my email after I had Bennett in the hospital. I'm sure I was, and responding to things. And so that week off was great. I would ideally, what I did with my second, because I didn't have enough leave, even though I was an employee, I didn't have enough leave. And I'll say, for anybody listening, I'm in Washington State. We now have paid Family Medical Leave Act. And so if you're working, you can get paid. This was all before that. So kudos to that law being changed. But when I worked, I did sign up for, I think the county had like short-term disability that I could sign up for and get paid out. And I did that, which helped supplement some of that stuff, which was good. So I would say what I would do differently with my first, I don't know that I could have found that kind of payout as a 1099 as a non-employee, but if I could have, I probably would have looked into that a little bit harder. And then I think I would have just tried to find ways to kind of supplement that, because it's hard to go earning $0. I think that adds to some of the stress of having a kid. Yeah.
Well, it does. And I mean, listen, I'm a self-employed person, and I feel like anyone who is self-employed and they're trying to navigate maternity leave, I mean, it is a very challenging, time period. I mean, Rincker law pays me a salary, but, whenever I had both of my kids, my billables that month, my personal billables plummeted, right? Because I'm supposedly not working. But then also my whole team, their billables started plummeting too. So it is, if I could roll it back, I think I would have planned for that dip in the finances, a little bit better to know that it was going to happen. But you're right. I mean, on top of every other stress you're experiencing, right? Like now you've got financial stress. So it's just a hard, transition, no matter how you slice it.
I think the other thing I would have done differently, and not with my own money, but with my husband, is I would have been like, you work for county government, you have leave, you need to come home and help me. Like, you need to make sure that I'm not here all by myself in pain with an infant. Like, you need to prioritize this. And I think he thought, I'm going to get back to work because that's, again, we were just talking about, we're better. So it is an escape. So I think he thought, like, here's what I'm not good at, being a dad, which is not true. He's a great dad. But here's what I'm not good at, being a dad to a newborn. And here's what I am good at, going and defending people charged with serious felonies, right? And so I would have advocated for myself a little bit more within our relationship to say, I need you here. Like, even if what you're doing is holding the baby so I can take a nap, I need you here.
Oh my goodness, a shower, a workout, right?
Right. So the second time I had my mom come, and she, for longer, and she was still working at the time. So she would work half days for the state remotely. But it was such a different experience because every single morning I would get up and I would hand the baby I would hand Graham off to my mom, and then I would go take a morning nap. And it's just easier to deal with things when you're not exhausted.
So to shift gears just a little bit, to fast forward, I mean, eventually your children you're in school right now, but I know that you mentioned childcare challenges. So how did you navigate that when they were younger?
Yeah. So with both of my kids, they spent the first year or so with the same friend. I had a friend who was a stay-at-home mom and wanted to earn some extra money. And so I would pay her to watch separately, obviously, but watch both my boys. She had with Bennett particularly, she had a little girl home at the same time. And so it was like a built-in big sister for Bennett. She would send me texts and videos, and I just felt like it was just having like another family, like loving on my child. It would get complicated though, because, if you're sending your kid to daycare and your kid's sick, your kid's staying home. But if you're sending them to just a one person, like if her kid's sick or if she's sick, right, then she's having to cancel. And so there were days I scrambled to find additional care. There were days, this was before Zoom court, right? So there were days that I would have to bring him or drop him off with my husband real fast for me to run into court. Or I had joined, we have MOPS, it's mothers of preschoolers, but it's basically, I had the flexibility. I was working, but I had the flexibility to go hang out with all these other moms, and many of them were stay-at-home moms. And so I developed friendships with them. And so sometimes when my childcare would fall apart, I would text them and say, I'll pay you if I can just drop him off with you. And so they were great about that. I don't have my mom and dad don't live in my town. My husband's mom does not live in this town. So there wasn't family to rely on. So it's kind of like creating your own, similar to we network for our jobs. Like I networked with mom friends. I was like, great. How can we talk about being a mom? Can I drop my kid off if I need to? How can we kind of have this village that works for us? And it was a way for them to kind of make some extra money when I needed them. And a way for me to make sure that my childcare was covered. And then after about a year for each of them, they went into an actual daycare facility, which again, frees up so much, right? That is open every single day. And the only time you can't drop them off is when your kid is sick, as opposed to some of the other external factors.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked before this call, you had mentioned that you stockpiled babysitters, and I like the language with that. But I mean, it's so important because I just feel like the thing with childcare is at the drop of the hat, you can lose it, right? And I have memories of me having to be in court in 40 minutes and getting a phone call that my nanny was exposed to COVID. And, even just recently, I lost childcare for a week due to some stomach flu and family issues and things. And it never happens at a convenient time. And so it's you kind of have to plan that that's going to happen at some point, right?
Yeah, which is just another balancing, right? Plenty, if you don't have children, you're just going to work, right? There's not all these external random things that can get thrown at you regarding children. So I did stockpile baby. I mean, I was posting on Facebook, who has a teen who will babysit for me, when I was pregnant. And I was capturing names and phone numbers. So I have the problem with babysitters is the same thing. You get them when they're young and then they graduate and they go off to college and you lose them. So you kind of have to be circling back through your roster, adding names to the roster all the time, right? It's like, I'm a March Madness fan and we're peak March Madness right now, but it's like, you got to play your bench sometimes and keep adding to your bench.
Right.
But it's, I have a lot of friends who don't have kids. And so, they'll be like, hey, do you want to do this thing tonight? Or, every time I get invited to something, if especially if it's my husband and I are going, I have to find a sitter, which one, costs money. And two, you have to find a kid involved. And the problem is half the time the really good babysitters are also like, they play sports and they're involved in school plays. And so they're involved in their school. So you kind of got to be able to have 3 or 4 that you can be like, hey, are you available this night? And when you get a no, just keep moving on to the next one.
So, Quinn, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsor. But when we get back, let's talk about time efficiency. This episode of the Billable Mom podcast is brought to you by Rincker Law PLLC, focusing in food, farm, and family. When I'm not a mother juggling 2 littles at home, I am the principal attorney of this nationally recognized law practice, where we believe that strong communities have both strong families and a food, fiber, and agriculture system. At Rincker Law, not only do we do family and matrimonial law, but we work with entrepreneurs and agriculture producers on business, estate, and succession planning. We are a client-focused, results-driven law practice. At Rincker Law, we also support other billable moms, not only in the workplace, but also with clients, helping them live their dreams, both in business and at home. For more information, visit us at www.rinkerlaw.com, Cari Rincker, food, farm, and family. All right, so post kids, the balancing act has we're here. How do you make sure that your time at the office or at work is the most efficient?
Such a good question. I feel like, a couple of things. I try to lean into when I'm actually productive, right? But I also think like every mom knows this. Like if you just especially after the pandemic, when you're like home with 2 children trying to juggle work, but like if you get like 2 hours free without kids, without interruptions, like the things you can kind of churn through is so, it's just give me a mom. Like they are the most productive people ever because again, talking about running with the parachute on, the minute the parachute is off, like you're actually faster, I think. So there's that, but I will go, I'm working like, let's say 8 to 5, but if I still have work to do, right, that's sometimes happening on the nights and weekends. And so I try to, just maximize product. Like if there's a night where I'm like, I'm not focused, I'm rereading the same paragraph, like I'll just say, you know what, it's not tonight then, right? I don't want to spend 4 hours getting 2 hours of work done. I want to, I'm going to go to bed or I'm going to go watch a show or something. I'm just going to check out because I'm clearly not paying attention. But then when there's nights where I'm like, okay, yes, I have several hours in me, like I can do this and I can get this work done, then I'll do it. Same thing on the weekends. Like my husband, when he can take the kids to the park and give me a couple hours, I will get some stuff done, right? Like, even if that's cleaning my house first, but it's like, I feel like when I leave him and he cleans the house, like what takes him a couple hours, I can get done real fast with some like good music churned up and just, and sometimes I feel like my office is a disaster, both my work office and my home office, but sometimes I got to clean it up first before I can be like, okay, what do you need to focus on? And then just going down, I keep a checklist always. My other problem is that when I'll remember things I need to do as I'm falling asleep, right? Like, oh, don't forget to do this. Or I have my best ideas like right before I fall asleep, which is useless because in the morning I can never remember them. So I will email myself. And, anything that's as I'm falling asleep, I'll email myself. But I think organizational structures put in place are super helpful for me, so that I just know that I'm coming in and doing what's next on the to-do list and just trying to focus on getting at least a couple things done when I have space to do it.
So to shift gears, you're married, and I know that your husband is very involved, as a parent. And so talking about how you navigated that partnership with him on caretaking responsibilities.
Yeah. So my husband is, he has wanted a kid. I mean, he was kind of the driving force behind us having kids, not because he was like, we need to have children, but because I just couldn't picture him not being a dad. He is the first. I don't even I love my kids, but I'm not going to sit down and play with a random strange kid. Right. When Bennett when I'd go to daycare, other kids would hold my legs, hug my legs. And I'm like, you're not even my kid. I'm not, go away, strange child. Whereas my husband knew all the names of he knows all the names of the, the kids in other kids in my kids' class, and he knew all the other daycare kids, and give them high fives and all that kind of stuff. So he was like, I just thought he's going to be a natural at this. This is going to be great. So we had Bennett, and he had been signed up for a daddy boot camp through the hospital, and it ended up being we had Bennett before he got into that class, so he was scheduled after Bennett was born, so he canceled the class. And when we first were home with the newborn, every time Bennett would cry, Aaron would bring him to me and say, oh, he needs his mom. He needs to be fed or changed or swaddled or whatever, right? And it was just this, it didn't come naturally to him. I'm like, you can swaddle this way, right? But it just was there was a mental block. And I was so thrown by it because I'm like, this is a man that wanted children, right? And so I told him, you've got to go back to that class. You've got to feel comfortable with, babies. Maybe my situation is different. I just felt like there were things, I thought I've already talked about, I think being a mom was hard. I think it was a hard transition. And also there were things that just came down, okay, I'm going to hug him. I'm going to hold him. I'm going to feed him. I'm going to swaddle him. There were things that just came naturally, right? I wasn't nervous about changing a diaper, right? And so he went to that class and he came back way more empowered to here's how you can rock the baby when they're making this sound, here's some ways to rock, here's some ways to swaddle, here's some ways to do this. And it was just, it almost empowered him to I don't need to be the mom to comfort my child. Right. So that was super helpful. I also just think that, for better or worse, society, there's things that society just ingrains in you, right? Mom is primary caretaker. Mom is, when someone should, I'm in this Facebook group, the Peloton Law Moms. So you have to be a lawyer and a mom and own a Peloton or have Peloton access. And I watched a lot of them, take the default role in when COVID happened, right? And even when COVID happened, my husband and I were both lawyers. Our jobs continued, but we were, work from home type thing. And it was a couple weeks in, and he would sit down at the computer and not leave the computer. And meanwhile, I'm on conference calls, popping Lego arms back into Lego bodies while a kid screams that I'm not doing it fast enough. And I finally just said, I need your help. I'm going to drown if we cannot make it through this together. You need to help me. You need to take the kids on a walk so I can I will cover them. You cover them. But same thing, even before the pandemic, right? I needed to say, I need you to get up. My kids were formula fed. Bennett, especially after 6 weeks, right? I'm like, I need you to start waking up at night. We both have to get up in the morning and be lawyers. And why am I the only one who's waking up 3 times a night to feed our child when we both go to do the same job, essentially the same work? And it wasn't until I pushed back on some of those narratives of saying, you can do this too. Mm-hmm. I also deserve to be able to sleep at night. That he responded. He was like, you're right. I will start taking the nights. or every other night or whatever, so we found like a balance that worked for us. But I think it's really easy for, just because of how we've all been raised and just kind of the narrative that's just kind of unspoken, for everything to get dumped on the mom, like everything. And, probably if I was a dad, I'd also dump everything on the mom. Like, I always joke that I need a wife, right? Like, I need someone who's cooking my meals and, doing all this kind of stuff. But I think that there's something to be, I always tell like women who are like going into law school, they're like, what do you think? What do you think? And I'm like, if you're going to have kids, don't do it with somebody who's going to make it harder, right? Like, either have a supportive partner or don't have a partner. I mean, I think those are, that's that meme that goes on social media. Like, successful women, ambitious women can do it with a supportive partner or with no partner at all. And that's really sometimes the only options. But, I still had to say, hey, I need you to help, and you can help. And that took some, one, communication skills on my part, and two, just kind of us sitting down and having this conversation of like, I can't do it all. That's a myth, right? Like, you're here too. You're their dad. You should be able to feed them and change them and take them to sports. And, now when I leave, like, when I'm gone at night or whatever, like, I don't leave behind food. I have friends who are like, I left meals and I did this. I'm like, they can figure this out. Aaron is a grown-up. He's a successful trial lawyer. Like, he can figure it out as easily as I can. So, yeah.
I love that. So, and I have a friend of mine who pre-kids, I went to go visit her, and, she was up to her ears in motherhood and kids, and she's a very successful attorney. And, she was just, everything was kind of dumped on her. And it was like, well, he said when he grew up, his mom did everything. And I think she very much got stuck in the gender roles. I mean, and all she wanted was some time to go get a haircut, And so I do think it's important for women to stand up for themselves and to kind of fight for themselves, as well in motherhood, but, also not be afraid to have those tough conversations with their partners. So I know we're almost out of time. I do want to ask you, Quinn, what do you think is your biggest challenge for juggling your career and motherhood?
I think, in probably like what we've already talked about, which is like, am I gone too much? Sometimes I've like interacted with people on like a professional level, not like a ton, but like, enough that they would know me. And then they say, oh, I didn't know you had kids. And I think, oh, am I like, what does that say about me? Like, I mean, in some ways I don't bring my kids up, in work conversations, but also I'm like, does that say I'm working too much? Are my kids only going to remember, me as a lawyer and at working? One of my biggest challenges, which I'm trying to address, is when kids go on like planned vacations. So there for a while, right, my kids would come home for spring break or Christmas break, and I would haul them to the office. I would get annoyed that I wasn't being as productive as I could be. They had probably one of the more miserable spring breaks or Christmas breaks of anyone in their class, right? And I would take them back to school, and the other moms or the teachers would be like, did you have a great break? Was break so great? And I'm like, who had a great break? Not me, not my kids, right? Because they're sitting coloring in an office or watching on their iPad, and I'm trying to get work done, but then getting interrupted because somebody has to go potty, right? Or whatever. So I am trying to be, I think maybe one of the biggest challenges is just like the intention. I've been intentional about my career in a lot of ways, and I need to be intentional about my parenting. And now I book vacations way in advance, right? And I block off spring break and I block off a week at Christmas and we go someplace fun, someplace that I think will be fun. And hopefully my kids think, like, I try and plan vacations around, like, what do my kids want to do, right? We're going to Legoland in a couple of weeks. They're very into Napoleon and French stuff. So we might go to New Orleans, which will be fun for me and fun for them, right? Things like that. So trying to just be like, I only, trying to strike that balance between, yes, I only have them for 18 years. And also, I don't want that to be out of this guilt, right? Of like, are you doing enough because you only have 18 summers or 18 whatever, right? But also just being intentional of like, okay, when I'm not going to be my most productive and they're on break, can I go do something fun? Can we make some memories? Mm-hmm. Because I look at all these families who have grown children and when they still travel together, I'm like, I want that. I want kids who still want to hang out with me when they're adults. But also if I'm not traveling with them and hanging out with them right now as kids, they won't hang out with me as adults, right? Like why would we change patterns, right? So I'm trying to be like, all right, I've got some time. What are some fun adventures we can go on? And when can we best do those?
Yeah. Hey, so Quinn, how can our listeners contact you or find you?
Well, I'm like Quinn Dalan on Facebook and Instagram. It's not going to be a public Instagram, but I suppose if you follow me, I can follow you back. And my work, my legal aid work is, right now we're actually in the middle of a rebrand, but right now it's Yakima County Volunteer Attorney Services. So at Yakima VAS, on any socials to follow the work. But Quinn Dalan on Facebook or Instagram to follow me.
Thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Billable Mom. At The Billable Mom, we don't pretend to have the answers, but instead have all the questions. Please find us on social media and join the conversation at The Billable Mom on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter X, Pinterest, and YouTube. We also have a Facebook group where like-minded billable moms find solidarity and provide a resource to one another. You can learn more about The Billable Mom and our picks for juggling work and motherhood at www.thebillablemom.com. You can also connect with Cari Rincker directly on social media at Cari Rincker. Until next time, let's calm the chaos 6 minutes at a time.